What's up, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. I've played a ton of Season 9, and I think this is the least balanced patch of Overwatch ever, and the game plays amazing because of it. There's lots of very low skill heroes that are not getting so much value, and a lot of high skill heroes that you need to play in order to contribute on this version of the game, making the game a lot more fun in my opinion. There's a hotfix patch coming out today that we know about from Alec Dawson's interview on ML7's stream. I don't have the actual patch notes yet, but I do know it's coming out later today. You'll have to check what it is because I'm on an airplane today going to the Overwatch Connect event. But we know the heroes that are going to be changed to adjust our tier list accordingly, as there doesn't seem to be too many, and some of them are kind of obvious. So the first one that is going to be coming through is a nerf to Zenyatta, where he's going to have less distance on his kick, so that when heroes close the distance on him, such as Reinhardt, who has a bad matchup against Zen anyway, he can't get perma-kicked away forever, and you can't even get melees on him. I also feel that against a character like Winston's Primal Rage, Zen has the advantage discording him and kicking him more effectively than the Primal can even corral him. So less boop on that will certainly be a nerf, and he's going to have less health. I'm going to guess they're going to take 25 off, would probably be an easy breakpoint number, so he has the same number as Brig at least without armor health. They say they want him to feel like a glass cannon again. Look out, if this number goes too low, then he's going to be really weak. The health number is really important and may have ripple effects down the line, as the more health Zen has, the more aggressive his positioning and wider his angle is for a bigger line of sight onto the enemy tank to perma discord them. Remember, he needs line of sight on the tank in order to keep it on him, so the more he can press out into the open, the longer that cast of discord is going to remain, and the tank can't even get out of the way. The more the Zen is at risk in order to peek, the tank will easily break line of sight. So that should get fixed quite a bit, and it should be less miserable to play against a Zenyatta as a tank player now. Alec gave a lot of interesting data about the new projectile sizes and how it has affected accuracy at different ranks. Turns out at the polls at GM and Bronze on either end of the spectrum, it actually hasn't changed accuracy too much, because GM players were already hitting a lot of shots and Bronze players were gonna miss anyway, I guess. There's the biggest accuracy buffs from Plat to Master, but the biggest character that has benefited has been Widowmaker, where she's seen a 10% accuracy increase on her hitscan weapon, so they're going to be tuning that back, and Widow won't be as effective. Alex said that Junkrat and Roadhog are struggling, so you can expect buffs to them. A thing that I'll note about Junkrat that I have noticed as a Junk player is that because he needs 3 shots to kill, he really is just lesser to Pharah in every single way, who also needs 3 hits, however, does have 30 melee damage on her Conk Blast, so she can still kind of combo better than him, whereas he needs to land too many of his ammo on one target just to secure a kill. It's pretty bad. And Roadhog, of course, when a character like Diva is a top tier pick, is going to struggle regardless, but I think just in general isn't really fitting with the ebb and flow fast-paced gameplay that Overwatch 2 has. Yet again, Alex said that the projectile size on Mercy and Baby Diva's weapons is going to be tuned back because it's been egregious. Doesn't change the game so much, but Mercy and Valk for sure is going to be less reliably going to be mowing down the entire enemy team, but I don't know, it's pretty effective regardless of the projectile size, I feel. Zarya is going to be seeing a buff because a lot of the beam weapons didn't really get any major benefit to the projectile changes. Granted, they increased the beam size of like Echo's focusing beam just to try to keep it up with the accuracy increase of everything across the board. A lot of these characters like Symmetra, Mei, Zarya don't really benefit much because they weren't that hard to hit to begin with at close range with beam weapons. Alex said that Illari is going to be getting a buff as she is really struggling. The game's too fast. She needs too much time to kill. I also think that's another struggle that Ana has, but she has more utility. Both of them are struggling with the fast-paced game, I would say. The DPS passive doesn't look to be getting changed quite yet, but it's something that they're watching. They're interested in maybe tuning the number, but it's core to the way the game moves right now, as Alex says, and I tend to agree. I'm happy with the number as it is. I think let's see how the tank experience changes once Zenyatta isn't easily a perma pick in the meta. And also on top of that, he gave a lot of win rate data on some of the heroes that I think will help inform today's tier list. While I don't have the complete patch, we do know how the heroes are performing generally at a bunch of different ranks. So let's start off with the support category, because this is the one that I think has the massive chasm of difference of output based on what heroes you pick. So at the top, we're going to put Zenyatta, where he was in S tier for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, I think these nerfs may put him back down into A tier. I still think he's going to be the best poke support, mainly because those, let's say, quality of lifestyle changes to his Harmony Orb that allows a target to flank outside of line of sight. Flankers are amazing in this meta, so they can really utilize that Harmony Orb. Zen might have to change his playstyle and positioning, but I still think he'll be a top tier pick, possibly even higher, back up to S tier if the surrounding cast fits for that. Above him, though, in the most reliable tier is going to be both Lucio and Moira, who unfortunately is like a Giga Brawler type character. Moira is obnoxious at every tier of play, it seems, and it sucks because on one hand, she's kind of a do-nothing interaction type hero, but on the other hand, she's just got a lot of free and forgiving stats and can be a nightmare for a lot of characters, especially when you think of how many flanks are going on and how to need to combo your damage effectively together, get out. Her movement skill is amazing, and whenever the game has been more movement based, particularly like at the launch of Overwatch 2, Moira was amazing just because of that, and she's gotten improvements, I think, since then. Lucio is an S tier pick that, if you learn how to play him, is going to control the game entirely. Because the game is about team shooting, using your resources in order to aid teammates into position is the difference of crossfiring and team shooting together, and also parrying your teammates back away from such crossfire. And Lucio possibly got one of the most significant single hero buffs in this entire patch, where his boop is actually effective now, and it's going to be able to send tank heroes off the map in certain cases, or at the very least keep targets off of your allies. So that's another way that he's influencing the team shoot mechanics of the game. Lucio is very, very good right now. And he's one of the characters whose accuracy has gone up the most because he has the fatter projectile type, which got a flat buff across the board for all of them. And I will note, those fat projectiles are even scarier when they can crit. It's one thing to have a Pharah rocket be a lot easier to hit. Lucio's weapon is kind of similar, and it can hit headshots, which are a lot easier on these big, massive hitboxes, especially on characters like tanks, for example, or snipers, or other immobile targets. I'd say if Zen gets knocked down lower in the meta tier list, it will be because of Lucio and the speed that he enables, overwhelming him just too much. Now let's talk about the other end of the spectrum, heroes that I think you should avoid. The biggest trap character in the game right now is Ana. The reason is her time to kill with her rifle takes way too long. A character like Zenyatta can apply both of his utility items out into the field and be able to contribute damage meaningfully and brawl and fight. Ana is all in on those abilities having impact, so I think you have to both position flawlessly and time and aim your abilities basically flawlessly. If you use sleep or nade too early in the fight, it can be your death because her head hitbox is massive. She's very easy to run down and trade out. Remember, characters like Lucio, Tracer, Genji, Moira throwing damage orbs at you. The overwhelming amount of damage and pressure that goes onto the support backline right now is immense, so Ana has to basically play great in order to have a chance, and I think there's a lot of stages on the maps where you're just going to feel like you can't transition appropriately, and I'm going to say she's situational at best. You really need the fight to be entirely set up in your favor, and then she can be okay, but I still think she's just too hard to play, and there's not a big enough upside in what she does. Alec didn't mention her as a low win rate hero, but I think as players really start to learn the movement of the game, you're going to realize that Ana's upside just isn't there, and you can start exploiting her immobility rather easily. Illari is said to be getting buffed. I don't know what it is yet, so I can't really be confident in putting her higher than below Ana tier. Yes, she has mobility, but unless her time to kill is really impressive or her projectile size gets to a state where she's going to easily duel some of these flankers, I can't see the meta really ever shifting into her favor unless lots of things change. The game is just very divey and movement centered. You're either rush down or dive comp is typically what you're going to be playing, so her bunker style just isn't really applicable to this version of the game, in my opinion. Also, on top of that, when defensive style tanks like Winston Bubble or Diva Matrix are top tier, her ultimate doesn't look as good all of a sudden because there's ways for the enemy to interact with it and take it off the table completely, not to mention Genji Reflect as well, who's a top tier character. I think Kiriko's got the mobility to contribute in an important and interesting way. Lots of escapes, her headshots are easier to hit, but just not as much overall value as the picks above them, or not as easy as Moira and Forgiving. Kiriko is exploitable mainly because her style of healing can really easily be shut down by the DPS passive. It's just not enough. There's a lot of times where you absolutely need to go aggressive as Kiriko, and it's going to put yourself at risk, I think, whereas other characters are a little bit more defensible and forgiving. I think she has a higher ceiling than the remaining supports, but is a little bit more difficult to play, so keep that in mind. I will kind of lump all of these three together because I think these picks are just fine. I'll put Brig slightly lower because I think she's more punishing than other picks right now. You have to be a top tier Brig not to get chunked down by the big projectile sizes once your shield drops. Probably playing Mercy or Lifeweaver is going to be easier for most players. And in fact, I'm going to switch these around in the last second because I think Lifeweaver doesn't have the same upside that Mercy does, because getting a res or getting damage boost on a lot of the DPS picks is incredible value. While it might feel bad that your healing is getting downshifted due to the debuff of the enemy DPS passive, overall, Mercy's verticality on dive maps, especially to fly through the air and just easily super jump out of the way, is really important. Like, it's the opposite of what characters like Ana and Illari have to deal with in the tier list. While they need to be all in on hitting their offense, Mercy can continuously fly away, and she enables DPS picks, which are core components to the team, right? Like, it was one thing to say back in the day, DPS are kind of useless, you should just pick a DPS style support yourself and DPS better than them. Well, that's not really applicable anymore. You really want to get value out of your damage oftentimes, as they're important to set up the pressure of the map, as well as finish the point off of the objective when the stall's coming in. There's a lot of situations in Overwatch where the enemy might just win by stalling onto the objective and respawning, and you really need your DPS alive to apply the passive to clear them off. Otherwise, the HP buffs make the time to kill insurmountable. In a lot of cases with Season 9, I was a bit surprised that, like, I think it takes more skill to play this version of the game, oddly enough, because they were thinking that the hitboxes were so forgiving that makes the game easier. I don't find that to be the case. I actually think you have to be more consistent than you did before, and the time to kill is just longer. It takes more effort to kill the same things, and you need more teamwork. Like, you need more individual and team play. The game is actually harder in many ways, just less punishing. Like, it's confusing how that works, but having Mercy is a key component because you need a character that can really help your DPS oftentimes. Now, these other picks in this category can do that, like Zen Harmony Orb. Lucio can create distance and spacing. Moira is going to pressure their DPS to make it a little easier for you, and Kiriko is kind of off-angling with you. They're all kind of in a theme of actually being able to help DPS a lot, whereas characters like Ana and Illari are kind of like a little bit more tank focused, usually either against the enemy's tank or healing the tank because they're just maybe not in position to heal DPS. Like, Illari doesn't really heal DPS very well, right? There's a big gap between that performance. I think the same goes for Lifeweaver, who I was very surprised by how important it is to have a durable support that can get away, because Focus Fire and Dive is so strong. Lifeweaver having so much movement and defense with his pedal platform and being able to pull enemies out of Focus Fire range, these are a lot of useful tools, and his raw healing stats isn't actually the only thing he gives at the end of the day. So yes, he does heal less once the DPS passive is applied, but it's still a lot of big impact plays, especially with Tree being able to shape the battlefield, trap the enemy tank in. Lifeweaver's got a lot of plays to make that are a bit easier than other supports, I think, but maybe not as forgiving and brainless as Moira. So we'll see how that all shakes out. I will put Baptiste up here as well. I'm going to put him just under Zen because I think a key part about Baptiste's gameplay that was lost is that his battle against DPS is significantly worse, and his overall team healing is a lot harder. Because the DPS passive is getting applied everywhere, Baptiste really is going to struggle to heal out of position teammates. It gets easier the more they clump together and take advantage of the splash healing, but the time to kill is so weak based on everyone having higher health. Baptiste's damage didn't go up. Like, his accuracy goes up, but it wasn't so hard to hit before. For me anyway, I don't think he duels things as easily. Granted, with Window he can, but outside of the ult fight, Bap is just a little bit tricky to play. His ceiling is super high though. At the highest skill tiers, he can be amazing, but maybe not the easiest pick for most players, so I'm kind of torn on where to put him. But if you think your skill can handle it, he can surpass even Moira on this list. Onto the DPS category. There's certain things we knew were going to be the case, and Alec Dawson's interview confirms it. The win rates on flanker heroes like Genji and Tracer is very, very high. Dive comp is back in a big way, partially because of the projectile hit size increase, but even just in terms of like time to kill and having the DPS have a passive that increases team damage overall, so they don't need to have as much damage themselves because the team cuts through healing. This is a major benefit to any flanker style hero that can avoid focus fire but get angles in order to apply it. I also think Genji is particularly good because he can finish kills and go in and be durable at the same time. So he has a small tankiness to him with being able to reflect and then snowballs fights with dash resets. That makes him amazing. I think based on your skill level, you can just put these A1 and A2 based on however good you think you are. Now, Widowmaker would be S tier along with this, but because they're nerfing her a bit, it depends on how severe this is. We're going to drop her down, but with good aim, angles, surprising the enemy with a quick headshot, Widow can be incredibly oppressive and is going to hard mark a lot of other heroes out of the list, I think. Like a lot of characters that maybe freely roam around the map get blasted by Widowmaker, and depends on how easy they make her or not. Still going to put her around A tier because I doubt she's going to fall farther than that. The dev said that the Pharah rework was very successful and she's doing very well. I think once you get the hang of how you're supposed to play her, she reminds me of Echo in terms of there's a movement cycle. You want to rotate through the map. And in fact, while she has less vertical mobility, not constantly in the skybox forever, thank Lord they changed that. Now she has more mobility because she has like 2 ways to dash. Options are always really big in Overwatch, where she either can conk blast herself or use it to manipulate the enemy to set up a shot, or use it to do melee damage effectively, is the damage number they gave Conk Blast. So that was a huge buff. And then anyway, Pharah got buffed because she has a thick projectile, which got the biggest accuracy increase in terms of projectile size. They're hitting a lot more easily and reliably, and Pharah does splash damage on top of that. So Pharah is a really good pick for a lot of reasons, and she's no longer necessarily beholden to the Mercy pick either, because she's effective at different styles of play, moving around very quickly. So the speed of movement is important, and that's the reason why Hitscan characters don't necessarily hard mark Pharah, because she can flow through the combat so well and easily. We'll roll through a few of these thematically in a row. Hanzo's a top pick, Echo's a top pick, Projectiles got easier, and these are good teamwork heroes. Recon Arrow helps you set up the fight. Both of their ultimates are situationally good in the way that team fights can flow in Overwatch. A lot of players are complaining about Hanzo's one-shot capability thanks to the Mercy Pocket, but I think he's good even outside that, turreting up in the team and just applying general pressure. Even hitting a couple body shots will land you a kill thanks to Storm Arrow, and again, it's these options, right? It's like Pharah has the Conk Blast to finish. Storm Arrow got a buffed cooldown rate and as well higher damage, so it's kind of your way you're going to secure kills on your own, but pressuring the enemy and landing projectile headshots, very key. Characters that can't headshot with projectiles are a lot worse despite being more accurate. We'll get to that when we talk about Junkrat way down here at the bottom of the list, but because Hanzo can headshot, that's a big change and alter to his time to kill. A few other categories of DPS we'll toss out kind of in a row. We're going to say these anti-flank turret style heroes are kind of the worst they've ever been. I think Torb can really lay down some damage on tanks, but his turret, I don't think got a buff, so it just does meaningless damage against the higher health point flankers now. So he doesn't really zone out flankers at all, in my opinion, and they're super reliable against him. And on top of that, there's a lot of long-range damage dealers that are pretty darn good, like Pharah, Widow, Hanzo. So Torb's just not great, in my opinion, and way too much work. Sim, along with Junkrat, too unreliable with the way their damage works. There's things flying all around, and while you can rush on Li Jiang in order to get to the point and set up turrets, I don't know, maybe she's better than Junkrat, and that's about it. Junkrat has a severe problem because he needs to hit 3 abilities, and that's just really expensive for his kit to do. They did say they're buffing him, so we'll see how much more reliable they make any of that kit. I don't know what they can buff without making him way too easy, because the projectiles are easy to hit. It's just hard for you to secure kills or specifically enter a duel knowing you can win it. Like, it's just too unreliable. Meanwhile, everything easily hits you as well. So it's just not really worth it, in my opinion. I've adapted some strats to try to make Junkrat work, which I want to develop when I get back, but I think he's kind of a joke pick right now. Sombra and Reaper, we're just going to put down in the middle of the tier B list. They're fine. They can work with teamwork. Their ceiling isn't as high as the other flankers, but they're very reliable and have either good shutdowns on tanks or can brawl it up. They're okay. Mei, I don't rate too highly either. I'm not sure where I would put her next to Torb necessarily, but basically because she doesn't gain a big benefit from the accuracy changes across the board. Beam, not really going to miss it anyway, so that doesn't help. The projectile, while is easier to hit, the time to kill on key targets like Tracer is just kind of gone entirely. So a lot of these flanker characters are just buzzing around you and are able to burst you in the head easier than you'll ever hit them efficiently. So Mei's really only good at isolating a tank, and you shouldn't be playing a slow tank anyway. While she can run over a character like Sig, that's kind of the only good tank she's good against. I guess maybe you could play her in a Ryan comp, who's a character I think is decent, waiting to be kind of okay once Zen gets nerfed. I don't really have much faith in Mei, and Blizzard doesn't get so much value when everything is escaping and moving out of the way anyway, that, you know, there's just not a lot for Mei to do. Now let's look at the hit scan heroes. We'll say Bastion first. We'll also put him just middle of the road as B tier because he's a bit of a knowledge check of the enemy. At the lower tiers is going to be really good because tank players don't know what to do up against him, and really it's all about structuring the engagement around him. His health is a little bit higher, so a little bit more forgiving, and at tiers where the aim is worse, I think you will struggle to get through that armor health, which is significant. Rolling through the other 4 kind of medium range hit scans, we're going to put Cassidy down at the bottom here as well, maybe like somewhere above these characters, where he does have Magnade, but he gets outranged by so many different effective DPS, including Hanzo, that really Cass shouldn't succeed. It's like he'll work until the enemies start outranging you, and then good luck. The flankers are a bit too fast. There's either too much dive or too much range for Cass to meaningfully contribute. Soldier has an even matchup against him, so I'll just barely put Soldier here. I think a lot of players would rate Soldier very highly in this meta. Very consistent damage. The problem is the time to kill is so long that you really need like a lot of team shooting to have an impact. Meanwhile, these other characters have bursts of impact quicker, and Soldier's not too difficult of a dive target at the same time with limited defense options. So I don't know if I really rate Soldier on any map as being particularly good, but B tier I think is good for him, middle of the road. Characters that I do think are a lot better are Ashe and Sojourn, which have differing ranges. Ashe being super high consistent, I think marks the other DPS under her here, where against a soldier, especially McCree, Ashe having more range means she has a significant time to kill advantage in these longer poke fights. There's a lot of shooting going on, so having more ammo overall and a better ultimate. Keep in mind, TNT is going to ignite the entire enemy team, potentially applying the DPS passive in an AoE. So that's really good. Ashe is a strong character. Sojourn, I don't know where I want to put these characters in this list. It's all aim dependent anyway. It kind of depends on who you can be more accurate with and play more effectively. I think I'm kind of judging this based on the ceiling I anticipate them to have with equal skill put in across the tiers, but it's all going to be your own personal skill expression anyway with the DPS class. You got to perform on these characters. None of these picks at the top tier are like free and forgiving. If anything, I think the DPS category just got harder because you have to play difficult DPS heroes to get value. I mean, when was the last time we could say like Sim was this low, Mei is this low, Torb? Basically all the crutch DPS are really weak right now, and you better learn to try to aim on the new projectile sizes that are somewhat easier to hit, but you gotta hit more of them. There's not really a way to take the path of least resistance on DPS anymore. You have to learn to play Genji, basically. Like, why mess around with these other gimmick heroes when Genji does what a DPS needs to do in the new version of the game? Something I really try to do with my tier list is try to think about how one tier is likely to counteract the others. If you think a lot of the gimmick heroes like Mei, Torb, Junk, Sim, Bastion, if Pharah and Hanzo are good, a lot of these picks get blown out of the water, and then a bunch of the sniper characters that are in the A tier that are really good and consistent can get marked by Genji or Tracer and make their lives miserable. So I think it kind of is making sense, and especially the type of comps you should be seeing in your games. Now, let's get to the tank category where things get interesting. Zen is supposedly getting nerfed, but I don't think he's going to be nerfed out of the game. In fact, I anticipate that the rules of mobility are still going to be king, so the mobile tanks are going to be top tier for me. Diva, Winston, Wrecking Ball, these characters that can move in and out of the fight, sync with a dive, get together with your Genji or Tracer and dive with them. Or Diva is kind of the staple pick right now, I think, because she can deny DPS damage, and if you're denying damage easily, flexibly, and can move from left to right, turn around in order to eat the pulse bomb, take care of a teammate who's getting focused. Being able to put someone in a cone of silence is really powerful because they'll be able to get healed and shake that DPS passive off. So D.Va's really good, and the other two are good at applying the pressure to go in. Either way, the better you are at ball, probably at the top tier, I think they consider them even better, but I think these heroes are dominating the game when synced up with the DPS. You let the flanker go out, the tank tries to jump in with them, collapse together, and everything falls. It's this synergy up top that makes these support heroes down at the bottom basically unplayable. Like, what are they going to do? When you don't see the flank coming, it pincers against you, DPS passive gets applied. Good luck hitting enough shots in order to fire your way out of that situation. Doomfist, I never know what to put with Doom. He's a mobile hero too. I think it depends on your skill. I probably might want to put him lower because I think he's easier to counter than these. These are kind of free and forgiving. You don't necessarily need the damage from Doom in order to secure the elimination, but if you're really good at Doom, he can go up a tier. The devs did say at lower tiers that Junker Queen was a top pick because her knife got a lot easier to hit. That projectile size is big. Having the shout to give your whole team more stats, that's got to be considered impressive. And the ultimate can be really good at swinging health back onto you with a higher health point overall. You've got a lot of health swing to make from being kind of low in order to then burst your way up with a lot of healing onto you. Ana's not so great of a pick, so if you're not facing her to get antied, then your self-heal's not going away. Even though the DPS passive is applied to you, you have a lot of offense to shoot and rebuff them as well. So Queen, I think, is quite good, and especially when you think like the Wrecking Ball or Winston are good, Queen is a really good response to that if you want to have a more static playstyle but still be able to move. That's the thing. Queen has the speed and extra health, whereas some other tanks that maybe are like defensible don't have as much ability to get around or AoE ability for their teammates. And then at higher tiers, Alec Dawson did say Sigma has a better win rate up top, but I think for most players outside of GM, I think Sig's actually bad. Like, I think if you're GM, you would put him maybe in S tier as one of the top tier picks. The problem with Sigma is he doesn't go get space for you. He doesn't have an active playstyle, so he requires your squishy teammates to play around him, and so that often means you're going to be peeling into bad positions when you could be taking over the game offensively. So you can like try to bunker on certain maps, especially sniper maps, keep your good position. It's going to go a lot farther on a map like Havana as opposed to trying to make it work on a more mobile deathmatchy arena style map. So I think Sig is like a problem pick for most players, but elite tier at GM, so keep that in mind. I'm going to say Reinhardt is super underrated actually, because he has the ability to put up a big shield, which denies a lot of DPS passive. The problem is Zenyatta is a thing. Getting discorded means it's usually not too hard for the enemy to have ways to cleave damage through your shield. That's a big problem. Once Zen's out of the picture, you can really see Ryan's potential because he can manipulate the fights really well as long as he gets into position. Keep in mind, Ryan is actually considered a mobile tank because his charge cooldown is low enough. He can get in and out of the fight. He can go aggressive, then come all the way back. He can really play the brawler role while not being as immobile as some of the other options that we're going to kind of clown on a little bit in this category, while also having defensive and a really key ultimate. So Ryan, really good. They buffed his damage numbers, so his time to kill against things is kind of similar to what it was before. Just make sure you're picking Ryan at points of maps where it's good, especially look to use him to kind of counteract some of these other tanks below him. Like Zarya, for example, I think is pretty weak, and Ryan's matchup has always been good against Zarya. Giving a shield to your DPS and denying the enemy DPS's passive is really strong. So much so that I think I'm actually just going to put him above these two on the A tier for tanks. He's not going to be as applicable to the movement-based meta maps, but there's a lot of stages on maps where I think he's actually really good. Let's quickly get some of the lower ranked tanks out of the way. Roadhog is supposed to be getting a buff. I don't think he's great. Map situational, matchup dependent. One of the bigger buffs they gave in the patch was Wrecking Ball got armor health. So while, yeah, you can hook a Wrecking Ball, he's more durable now, so he can kind of tank it in some ways. The hotfix today might change this opinion, but Roadhog with his take a breather takes forever in order to fully regain his health, especially when that DPS passive is applied. But he's got more health overall now, so he's got to huff more to get more of his higher HP to full, and you'll get less out of that entire ability because the DPS passive is very likely going to be applied to you once you have taken damage and need to heal from something. All that being said, though, his skill expression is still high enough that he can secure his offense okay, but it's just not reliable enough, and I think eventually the enemy should figure out how to counter you you because it's not so difficult. Also, the projectile size increase. There's a lot of these heroes that have big projectiles and headshot damage. I feel Hog is like one of the bigger recipients of easily hitting him in the head too much. And, well, you can just get melted by a Hanzo Storm Arrow, for example. So I would be wary of playing Hog right now. At least Orisa has some defenses, but she's so immobile, and she has very limited interaction against the DPS passive in terms of helping her team. I mean, yes, she's got a spinny spear, but the fight is often going to go around you onto your supports, and Orisa has always been best at bullying the enemy tank. But if the enemy tank is too mobile or get its value just based on the dive, and then sure, maybe you punish it and kill it, the time to kill is so long that they might even get out. So if Orisa burns her abilities and isn't securing the fight due to that, well, you're kind of not that much of a character. And also, if you think about it, if Diva is just a better pick for the entire meta, interacts with everything, why would you need Orisa? Like if Orisa is like a peel tank that is kind of brawly, Diva's just a better version of that. I'll put Zarya slightly higher than Orisa just because she can bubble DPS, who are very important in the meta. So there's some comps like playing with a Reaper, for example, I think you can still get to work, especially up against some of the face tank type characters. It's just that I think the enemy will counter pick you well enough, either with their tank, such as Reinhardt, Winston, going at your backline, playing kind of too fast for you. Oddly enough, I feel like Zarya bubbles don't have enough health in this version because like the damage can kind of blow through it anyway. So on one hand, you're giving her charge, but on the other hand, everybody has more health. So her time to kill doesn't feel that impressive. And in a lot of cases, you can just use those big projectile new hitboxes to easily blow through the bubble and focus her, as she's a character I feel isn't used to that DPS passive being applied to her normal body health. And her hitbox is pretty static and easy to hit in general. And Zarya, I think, is one of those characters whose head hitbox might have been a bit challenging to hit before, but it's not now with a lot of characters, just like Ana and these other small head hitbox style characters with the projectiles bigger, easier to just nuke her down. I think Mauga is just kind of meh. It's hard for me to see Sigma and Diva this far above him and think like, well, Mauga's going to have good matchups in the meta. Not really. It's like against maybe Wrecking Ball, I think he's decent. While the projectiles got bigger, Mauga's isn't so significantly bigger that he's all of a sudden really good at fighting flanker characters, which was already one of his weaknesses. And since he's a lifesteal character, well, the DPS passive reduces that. His abilities with his cardiac overdrive, as well as using that in cage fight, is just significantly worse. You'll trap a DPS in with you, and he's cutting down on your lifesteal. Also, he's hitting you for a ton. I think Mauga's skill expression is high enough, actually, that you probably can outperform me putting him in B tier. I think in general, we all know one of his biggest strengths is holding a corner and then running away when flushed out in the ult fight, and the game's just so much faster than that. You need like instant impact, where we got really excited with cage fight, like, wow, an ultimate that drops a big shield. Well, you know what else denies damage and is a big shield? A Winston bubble. Really good. And Diva's defense matrix is in and out everywhere. Like, the fight is happening quickly, and there's things interacting with the DPS fight immediately. What's Mauga doing? He's lifestealing, which is just worse as a concept, until he gets his ult, then he gets a shield. I don't know where to put Mauga, like, because everything I just said makes it sound like he should be worse, but I think if you're playing up against tanks that don't interact that way, he's fine. I don't know. Personally, I've seen him get roasted enough where I might even put him here. Yeah, that's what I got for you. Ramattra, my favorite tank in the game. Where am I going to put him? Am I biased? Do I think he mows down on Reinhardt? I think he's pretty high because, well, Ram has an interesting property to him where, while he's not going to be the best at interacting with the DPS battle, he has flow to him in terms of he has the ability to anchor Brawl, but then up tempo and speed. He's a tempo tank after all. But when he turns into Nemesis, he runs faster, which is important. Mobility matters. You want to be able to flow through the fight. So I think he does a lot, actually, and is good against a lot of matchups. He's not going to be like stellar into dive. And I think if you actually learn him, he is better than Reinhardt. Oddly, I think Ram's a character a lot of players don't really know the potential of and never learned the end game version of Ram. Because he transforms, he has both a rushdown and a poke style. So he can adapt in a variety of different comps, which I think also helps his tier list ranking here for me. We did one stream prior to me leaving, and I plan to do a lot more. Ram is a character you'll see me play a lot, and I think you'll see like he's really adaptable to different versions of play. Importantly, Nemesis punches cleave through targets, so hitting multiple things. So it's kind of easy in a way for you to snare and pummel through to get to what your DPS is fighting at behind. While he's not a dive tank, he has the ability to extend out and fight with them and set up his DPS more than you think. While Ramattra is not going to be pickable on dive maps against dive tanks, he's got a pretty good matchup against the rest of the game, actually. Guys, that's everything for the Season 9 tier list video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.